In this video we shall discuss some tips and ideas on the test automation. With test cases to be automated, and usually we first write the test cases and then we automate them, there has to be more details than for manual execution. For instance, such approach even is not too good for manual execution, but in manual execution it may somehow be considered acceptable. In test automation we have to provide much more details for the automation specialist to understand how to write the test for computer, to know that the application works the correct way. We have to remember that miscellaneous tools or systems may be used for test automation, so we should not use in our test cases such things that are locked to some tool or maybe some operation system. We should use natural language instead. And then the specialist in test automation will understand that things and use some proper command from his current tool or framework to automate such tests. We should mind timing synchronization, because any automation tool works with some speed. And any application also works with some speed. The usual situation is that the testing tool is faster than the application. So that testing tool has to stop and wait for some time for the application to reach the needed state. Here is the example. Imagine the situation when after clicking some button there has to pass some time for the result grid to become empty. If we forget about time, the software testing tool will immediately, right after the click, check the result. But the result is not ready yet. It only will be in some time, maybe in milliseconds. But still we have to mention that fact, and then the automation specialist will use some command in his script, making the software testing tool to wait for the application here. In programming, and of course in test automation, the hard coding is a very bad thing. So try to avoid writing in your test cases some explicit values, because you will somehow seduce the developer or the automation specialist just to use the well-known combination Ctrl+C, Ctrl+V and copy that value into the script. But once you use a placeholder, it becomes absolutely clear that this value should come from somewhere else, like a file, a database, and so on. So no hard coding will appear in the script. Remember about test independence. In test automation there is rather strict restriction on so-called linked scenarios. Imagine you have a scenario for some reason with 50,000 cases. It never happens in real life, but nevertheless, just imagine. And then the third test case fails, so all other almost 50,000 cases fail too. So never rely on any previous or any other test case. Make your test case absolutely independent and not linked to any other test case in any way. Of course, test automation is programming. We will write some scripts, we write some code, and all best practices that are used in programming are applicable to test automation as well. And all those bad things that should never happen in programming should never happen in test automation. For instance, here you see such bad situation as hard coding, such situation as magic number. Of course, this should be replaced with some function call. This should be replaced with some constant. And even more. Did you notice just right on this slide that there is a mistake here? It should be comparison, not the assignment. So as you can see, even in such short code, there is 1, 2, 3 mistakes. So no such things are allowed. You should write good code. In order to write good code and to write good test cases, you have to understand your tool and understand it well. Imagine such situation. Probably you are not familiar with the Selenium IDE of that version, but this doesn't matter here. We have to check that some web page contains some text in some defined place. That's the idea here. And then some automation beginner reads the manual and sees verify text present command and uses it. But it's wrong, because it does not consider the location of the text, that defined place. And that automation beginner should use verify text instead. So once again, understand your tool, read the manual carefully. Do not just see the first something that looks like what you are searching. You may be disastrously wrong, so read the manual up to the end. This idea is one of the last one. Sometimes people for some reason are trying to confuse actions with checks. Action is a step in a test case. Like enter something somewhere, click something, fill, click, and so on. The check doesn't change anything in the application. We only observe it. What is some value, if some link present or not present, or if some form is on the page, or if some button have some label. So here we act, here we observe. Never confuse actions with observations. So checks are observations. And the last idea here. Of course, this automation needs a lot of data, because we may perform some test hundreds or thousands of times. How can we get the data? There are several approaches. The first ones are usually combined. We use something random with some algorithms. For instance, a string of some random length starting with 5 up to 50 characters, or maybe string of 30 but random characters like letters, numbers, and so on. So we usually combine something random with some algorithm, and so we got good results. We may use some trusted external data sources like web services, databases, etc. But we have to trust that sources. We have to absolutely know what data we may receive from that external sources. We may use real existing user data, like for instance docx files, mp3 files, any video files, anything that we already have in real world to test. How does our application work with that data? And of course, we may use manual generation. For instance, imagine that you have to use 3 correct and 3 incorrect emails. So it will just take you a minute to write those 3 correct and incorrect emails and pass those emails to some automation test. And it will probably take you hours to write some script that will generate correct and incorrect emails. Of course, it's not 3 but 3 millions here and 3 millions here. The script is good. But if it's not millions but only 3 and 3, manual approach is good here.